and then we go up to a mixer. So thank you so much for sticking around here. Again, some stuff that you should know. If you parked in here, you can get a validation up front. There's like a special price for being here the whole day, but don't leave just yet. We have two amazing panels happening right now, and yeah, we're gonna have a icon side chat instead of a fireside chat, right, guys? So it's my honor to introduce these two gentlemen coming up next. They're going to be talking about navigating the future of digital payments. And we have two amazing panelists. Hector Martinez is the president of GM Sectec. It provides innovative solutions in managed detection, digital forensics, business continuity, and information security. They're headquartered here in Puerto Rico, and he'll be joined by Pablo Cuarón, who has been with Mastercard for over 10 years, responsible for leading operations and strategic planning in Latin American markets. He is the new country manager here in Puerto Rico, and they're here to talk about the future of digital payments. So help me welcome these two gentlemen, please.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. So super excited about being here, right? You guys, like, we're standing here before cocktails, so it's an interesting time of day. We've discussed, or we've heard a lot of interesting conversations, people talking about stem cells, exciting startups, but things need to get paid for, right? So we're here to discuss payments.
Yeah, all right. All right, everybody. Are we ready to go? How's the energy in the room? All right. Can't hear you. All right. Right before, we'll be a couple more sessions and then the cocktail session, and then, we'll hit it. All right. So Pablo and I were kind of prepping earlier today, touching on, how do we bring this digitalization journey that's been happening around the world and Puerto Rico, how's impacting Puerto Rico. And I think we can kind of get kicked off, Pablo. And I think you've been in Puerto Rico now less than a year since you moved from Mexico and seen kind of the digital ecosystem here. But how do you see the digitalization journey across industries, across payments, obviously, which is a big focus area? What are some of the changes, some of the trends, and then we can get into some of the other conversations around information security, some of the spooky stuff, et cetera. Okay. But what does that look like from your perspective?
Absolutely, thanks. Well, digitization and digital transformation are nothing new, right? Those are buzzwords we're getting used to nowadays. However, they have had and they continue to have deep impact across industries. And the financial sector is no exception, right? We've seen a number of products go digital, number of service offerings go digital, with mainly, I would say, two big benefits, right? We're seeing consumers being offered and delivered enhanced experiences because of two reasons. One is they are getting access to products they did not have access before, so broader access to financial services. The other, they are getting better products, a lot more data, personalized data, and customized product offerings. So we are seeing enhanced customer experiences. And then we're seeing changes to operational efficiency. So digital channels provide mainly an avenue for service companies, financial services providers, to deliver their products with better cost margins and to a broader audience. That is, again, that's the general trend across the sector, right? When we dive into payments, and bear with me here, because I'm going to take you in a slide journey history, right? But payments are a relatively nascent industry, right? If we think about payments or electronic payments before the 1980s, there's probably not much. 1980s, we're talking about ATMs, wire transfers, and that's pretty much it. Then we jump to the 90s, right? Debit cards, credit cards, nascent online banking, but again, pretty much it. We jump to the year 2000. E-commerce starts taking off. Huge buzz about online, the dot-com bubble, right? A lot more movement. Fast forward a little bit. Contactless payments are born around 2005. Again, 20 years ago, contactless payments are still a big opportunity today, but bear with me. 2005, contactless payments. Fast forward again, 2010, and that's where we see a major shift, right? I once heard Pascal Finet, some of you might have heard about him, say innovation happens gradually and then suddenly. And that's what we saw in 2010, right? New business models, wallets popping up everywhere, and that's when electronic payments really took off. 2020, wallets are pretty much everywhere. So after we look at it, digital transformation has an impact on everyday life. It's enabling new business models, enhancing existing platforms, and touching everybody's life, right? And that's kind of where we are today at a global stage. Where are we in Puerto Rico? Puerto Rico represents a huge opportunity because even though while I was walking you through what has happened over the last few decades, this evolution hasn't happened at the same rate or at the same speed everywhere, right? We've seen different countries and different markets take off at different speeds. And Puerto Rico still represents major opportunity when it comes to customer experience, when it comes to contactless payments, when it comes to making sure we can deliver optimal, safe, and secure experience or payment experiences to consumers, right?
Yeah, I mean, and just to stay on that, and you touched on contactless payments. We were chatting earlier on, what Costa Rica is doing or Chile is doing, who have very high levels of contactless payments and card-not-present payments, right? When we're using e-commerce and other types of transactions, digital transactions. What does that look like for Puerto Rico, and what is Mastercard doing to kind of help accelerate that journey? Obviously, in Puerto Rico, you have account-to-account payments like ATH, as well as other non-branded plastic systems or card systems. But there's kind of this whole evolution of leveraging brand networks to have more efficient, safer, and secure networks. Is that correct?
Yes, that's absolutely correct. And to bring that home and put it into perspective, right? We're thinking there's markets where 90% or north of 90% of transactions today are contactless payment transactions. There's markets where less than 5% of transactions are contactless transactions, right? Puerto Rico is somewhere or halfway in between. There's still opportunity to grow, but we're not as far back as other countries, specifically in Latin America. That said, we've seen that contactless payments bring enormous benefits in terms of security and convenience for consumers. And we're actively working to enable acceptance of contactless payments in the ecosystem. There's still room to grow and to make sure that merchants benefit from contactless payments, that consumers benefit from contactless payments, and that we make contactless a habit and easy to adopt in everyday life, right? We've seen that there's major use cases like public transportation, for example. When people start tapping, and that's how we refer to the behavior of contactless, actively paying with a contactless card, right? Tapping. When people start tapping, contactless becomes a part or of their everyday lives, right? And it's way more convenient to tap with a card than to try and get your phone out and make a bit of a mess. Now it's getting better with some smartphones opening up their antennas, right? But it becomes part of your everyday life. And ultimately, that's what you want about payments, right? I haven't met anyone yet, and hopefully there's one in the audience beside me, but who's excited about making a payment, right? Nobody wakes up and says, oh, I'm super excited about paying my bills this morning, right? However, people are excited about buying someone a gift, about buying a new pair of shoes. That's what you're excited about. What you look for is, with payments, it's to make that convenient, right? And contactless are a way for making that payment experience more convenient.
And just to stay on that, and out in the audience or out in the hall, we have Nave Bank, which is one of the first all-digital banks here in Puerto Rico. Is that kind of part of the strategy, the Mastercard strategy, to support kind of these digital-first financial institutions to help digitize? Because there's a whole experience that goes into that. And just to share a war story, we have a resource out of Brazil, so we have offices around Latin America, and we brought one of our resources from Brazil to Puerto Rico as an expat, and he had a lot of challenges onboarding with the local traditional banks. And when he knew that there was a newer bank, that had different ways of doing things, that was very attractive, because Brazil, obviously the financial sector is very advanced, and this whole element about digital onboarding, authentication, authorization is relatively seamless. What does that look like from Mastercard and kind of the Puerto Rico view, how that's all changing? Because obviously also the financial sector here in Puerto Rico is changing and transitioning into this digital first model.
Absolutely, and I think that the mindset here is to lift all the boats, right? We have an ecosystem play in mind, so there's room for everyone, and we're ultimately focused on delivering safe, secure, and convenient payment experiences, whether that's through Nave or whether that's through supporting the incumbents and players who have been in the ecosystem and have developed huge customer bases or huge bases of customers, help them be better, right? And there's opportunity for both. I think that ultimately we should all be working towards developing these better payment experiences and making sure they are safe and secure, right? And talking about safety and security, that's something you're very familiar with. What would you say are some of the main challenges when it comes to safety and security in the payments ecosystem and specifically in the Puerto Rican payments ecosystem?
Yeah, it's a great question and right up my alley. But yeah, I think, here and really abroad, I mean, one of the first things you think about when you're making a digital payment is it safe, is it secure, is it a trusted or trustworthy ecosystem to ensure that I can deposit my credentials, my personal information there, and the authorization happens, and then I can get my goods and services. One of the things that we certainly see, and as a company, we do PCI DSS certification. So PCI is the Payment Card Industry Data Security Standard, which is a consortium of Mastercard, Visa, American Express, all the major credit card brands that come together to support the safety of the ecosystem. And I would say that Puerto Rico, by and large, is relatively conversant and proficient in PCI DSS, but the reality is that cybersecurity, information security is a big challenge for all organizations. And we were chatting earlier, you had the Parallel 18 guys with those startups. One of the biggest challenges and one of the first hires is a chief information security officer, right? Somebody to help safeguard that information, because obviously that information is oil and it's something you want to digitize and you want to monetize. So information security has become very much front and center, and certainly Puerto Rico is not far away from that. Standards are always a good thing, but I would say that what we see as a company, that works on the proactive side and also on the reactive side for forensics when something bad happens, you have, as sophisticated as a threat actor here in Puerto Rico as you have in places like Brazil or Ukraine or, as far away as Asia Pacific, given that it's relatively a quick return on investment for a bad guy to infect a system or a supermarket or any type of organization. And it's happening every day here, like it's happening all around the world. You get a quick return on investment. And so information security still is a big and hot topic across many organizations. Many of these digital native companies, the first thing they think about is what can I safeguard and how can I make sure that it's an efficient, transparent, and trustworthy ecosystem. I'd say that typically the way we think about this is motivations of a bad guy or motivations of a threat actor are typically for reasons, right? You have cyber crime, you have hacktivism, you have cyber war, and you have cyber espionage. But the reality is that year over year, 80% plus is due to cyber crime. So the bad guys are looking to monetize with their tactics, techniques, and procedures. So there is a lot of threat, there's a lot of opportunity, but securing systems is certainly a big priority, as it is for financial organizations, but anybody that's really willing to develop commercial goods and services online, e-commerce, it's a big thing. I mean, Mastercard has been acquiring a lot of companies in this space. I mean, what can you talk to Pablo regarding some of those acquisitions? Recently Recorded Future, congratulations. It's a $2.x billion acquisition for you guys. On threat intelligence, you've acquired multiple companies in the past, like Risk Recon. What does that look like, and how does that help your customers? And at the end of, if you're badged Mastercard, how does that help the cardholder?
And maybe to bring that home, let me ask the audience a question. Let's do a show of hands, right? But how many people here, given that it's a relatively small audience, but how many people here have been affected at some point of their lives or know about someone who has been, hacked their social media accounts? Just look around, right? It's at least one person in every table. Who here has, again, identified fraudulent behavior in their credit or their debit cards at some point? Again, more than one hand at each table, right? So we tend to think that fraud is something that is not close to us, or it's probably we're not targets, right? Probably fraudsters are targeting exclusively ultra high net worth individuals, right? And that's no longer the case. Fraud's coming from technology. Fraud and cyber attacks are AI driven, right? So we need to catch up. And that's kind of the purpose, and that's what we're not catching up, but staying ahead, right? That's kind of what we're aiming for with some of these acquisitions. How do we ensure that we enhance our own and proprietary transactional data through partners, right? You were talking about our latest acquisition, and that's one of the largest companies in the world with access to huge data sets, right? So how do we bring those data sets and use them to enhance ours in order to have real-time visibility and make real-time decisions, obviously supported on AI technologies and AI-powered platforms, right? But that's a very different way to think about cybercrime and fraud, right? We're no longer thinking on a bad guy with dressed all in black and hiding in a small room. We are actually thinking about super sophisticated, very smart, tech-oriented people and organizations leveraging top-notch technologies, right? And that's what we are all up against, and that's what we need to anticipate, right? So how do we do that? We can, and again, maybe not all of you are familiar with the financial services industry, but 10 years ago, a number of financial institutions used to manage fraud by maybe thinking, okay, Hector, so last week you were in Barcelona, right? That's probably, well, that might be typical behavior for you, not sure. But that would probably not be typical behavior, right? So you probably, I don't know, you live in Puerto Rico, you wake up every morning, you buy a coffee, same time, same place, right? And then last week you flew to Barcelona. You're probably jet lagged and you were buying your coffee at the other side of the world at a very random time when compared to your traditional habits, right? A number of years ago, that would probably have come across as fraud, right? It's not fraud, it's just changing your behavior. And then what would have happened then? You would probably have had your transaction declined, you would be frustrated without your coffee, the merchant would be losing money, your financial institution would be losing money as well, and it would be a very poor experience. What we're aiming for, leveraging AI, platforms and technologies, is to have real-time visibility and to be able to make informed decisions in real time with higher levels of certainty, right? So it's making sure that we don't let the bad guys in, but making sure that we bring the good guys in, right? It's not only leaving the bad guys out, but bringing the good guys in. And that's kind of what we're looking for and how we're leveraging technology. That's where we want to go for, right? Ultimately, secure the full ecosystem, but enhance the customer experience. And why do I speak or why do I talk about the full ecosystem? Because Mastercard investing in huge company doesn't mean much if we're only working or partnering with banks, right? There's merchants, there's consumers. So if we make sure we bulletproof financial institutions, but we can't validate who's going online and making a transaction, then that becomes the weakest link in the ecosystem, right? A financial ecosystem might be bulletproof, but we are not sure that it's Hector who's actually paying for that coffee in Barcelona. We might be letting a bad guy in. However, if we have different ways to authenticate Hector, to validate his digital ID, then Hector is secure as part of this transaction, the financial institution is secure, and the merchant is secure. And that's what we're aiming for. We're aiming for a safe and secure ecosystem, right? And that's a very long answer to your initial question on why are we acquiring
No,
these
but
companies.
it's very good because I think, I mean, this goes kind of to the next point around, you guys recently signed a memorandum of understanding with the Municipio of San Juan, with the city of San Juan, around smart city, and love to hear what that looks like. But just thinking about it from a security standpoint, and it's something that we get asked often, we've seen it, with the recent war in the Middle East, how, exploding pagers and walkie-talkies. I mean, those are remote detonated devices that use a cyber network to be executed. And that took, I think I was reading in the New York Times that took 10 years to develop. But the reality is that that's all cyber war. And it's actually one of the first instances where a cyber attack really is hurting people at mass, at scale. And that's something that obviously is in the minds of mayors and a lot of cities, because how do you create a safe ecosystem that goes beyond the digital network? I mentioned earlier, ransomware is a big concern for many organizations and for for cardholders, even within the payment system. The reality is that it's happening in Puerto Rico, it's happening everywhere, and there are some very high ransoms. There are insurance companies that obviously cover ransomware, and the bad guys caught up very quick because they realized that companies that have ransomware insurance, there's a cap to how much can be paid out, and it's called director's liability. Director's liability is up to 30 million. So you typically see that, depending on the size of the company, the ransom requested doesn't surpass $30 million because they know that's the max the insurance company is able to pay out. So these guys are very, very smart, and they are changing the way that they're doing things very, very quickly. I'm curious as to how that looks like from a safe city, smart city initiative, because I guess that's something that, for us, for the folks here that live in Puerto Rico, live in San Juan, we want a more efficient and more digital experience, whether it's parking, being able to tap to pay with plastic, or with a tokenized wallet or e-wallet, and having better experiences. But how does that look like vis-a-vis security? But I'm really interested in understanding kind of that strategy, because I know that the city of San Juan is pursuing that across all fronts.
Absolutely, and I think that governments are key stakeholders within payments ecosystems worldwide, right? When we look specifically into Puerto Rico and San Juan, one of the things that I learned when I got here that really struck me the most and was very positive to learn is that you guys can actually pay taxes using your credit cards. Well, that's amazing. That doesn't happen everywhere, right? But again, yeah, governments are institutions that move a lot of money in and out, right? And then that means there's lots of payment flows going through the government. And government are enablers of business as well, right? So those are key partners to us. And earlier this year, we signed a memorandum of understanding with the municipality of San Juan to try and work together, specifically focusing on capturing tourism flows. How can we partner to make sure tourists are flying in and leaving their money in San Juan? They're not just jumping on a cruise and heading back, right? What do we need to do, and how can we partner? How can we leverage the data that we have? How can we leverage or use the information that the municipality has to try and work with those flows and try to make and develop better experiences for the tourists? Then there's what we think of as a potential business opportunity with small and medium enterprises, right? And that's the reality in a number of countries. Puerto Rico is no exception. We see a huge opportunity to work with small and medium businesses in Puerto Rico. When we think about the different rates of adoption in digital payments, SMEs are usually left behind. We focus a lot on consumers, we focus a lot on the affluent, everyone's working with their phones and their mobile apps, but SMEs don't necessarily have products catered to them. And that's something we want to work with the government and the municipality of San Juan as well, right? And then I was talking about taxes, right? There's this misconception that cash is free. Well, that's not true. When you start managing large volumes of cash, it becomes really expensive. There's a security cost associated in moving that cash. There's a logistical cost associated to moving that cash from one place to another. And then there's obviously an administrative cost, right? Reconciling and somehow money is missing. So there's actually a cost associated to managing cash that can be optimized through digital payments, right? And so that's, I would say, the third pillar of the memorandum of understanding is how can we work with the government to optimize their payment flows.
Yeah, I'd say pro tip: small doctors' offices are all cash, so go after those guys. No, but I think it's really interesting, and you touched on earlier artificial intelligence and how Mastercard is using AI. I can talk to you a little bit around what the bad guys are doing. So everybody knows, or most people know, the buzz around ChatGPT. There's obviously the inverse of dark GPT, which is very popular in the underground, in the dark web, and the deep web. And there's many tools that leverage artificial intelligence to commit crime, commit fraud, and be very effective at monetizing these tactics, techniques, and procedures. And I'm curious as to what is your view? What's Mastercard's view on artificial intelligence? Obviously, there's a lot of buzz. I think there's more buzz than actual goodness right now. But from a cybersecurity standpoint, we see it as a, it has a double edge, right? There's definitely a value of doing something that's very repetitive and having a LLM to be able to do this and help you be more efficient, but also we are seeing, for example, value in payment systems like tokenization vaults, which have been around in payments for a long time. Use tokenization vaults, which basically tokenization is taking something that is sensitive information like a credit card, passport information, putting it in that vault, and then desensitizing that information so that if somebody steals it, it's ones and zeros, that it's not my passport information or my credit card information. That's been around in payments for a long time. Mastercard's been a leader in tokenization for a long time. We're now seeing uses of tokenization to safeguard company secrets from large language models, right, from AI, whereas you're depositing your company secrets into a tokenization vault so that these AI systems are not learning your company secrets. So we're starting to see kind of this relative emergence of newer ways to protect from artificial intelligence. I'm kind of curious, and I'm sure the audience here is curious as to how are you taking advantage and protecting from artificial intelligence and everything that's going on out there.
Sure. So on the positive side, as you mentioned, artificial intelligence is nothing new to payments and has been around for a while. I'd say that from a Mastercard standpoint, we're focusing mostly on fraud prevention and cybersecurity, as we've described, right? How do we manage real-time data, large sets of real-time data, and make sure we prevent fraud and help our consumers and safeguard the full ecosystem from cyber attacks. And the other angle is personalization, which is something we haven't discussed much today. However, that's another important use case for artificial intelligence, right? With these huge data sets, we can better understand what are the preferences and what are the habits of consumers, right? And obviously, with the right privacy management and the right privacy protocols, we don't have access to individualized data. We only see aggregate data, right? And then financial institutions do have access to individualized data. But we work with our partners to make sure we can provide more visibility and tools so they can offer consumers real-time better products, better loyalty alternatives, better promotions that are catered to them, right? Instead of just shooting out a huge promotion for everyone, what does Hector like? What does he do? What does he enjoy? What does he spend his money on, right? So that's, or we can do that a lot better leveraging artificial intelligence. So fraud prevention, stopping cybercrime and artificial intelligence. On the flip side, I'm talking about the negatives, right? As I was saying earlier, we need to stay ahead of the game. Bad guys have exactly the same access that we do to developing technologies, right? So I was reading this morning something that our chief digital officer said and our chief product officer said, and he said, we need to rethink how we build things, right? It's not only a matter of safeguarding and putting rails around, but how do we build things? Who do we provide access to infrastructure? How do we anticipate, right? So it's not only about managing the transaction, but where does the information and the data live? How do we authenticate the user, right? Again, it's working with all these pieces and rethinking from the ground up, not only managing on the fly.
And it's interesting because you touched on a few elements there around the good and the bad of artificial intelligence. I think that when you look at the bad guys, the threat actors, who are obviously monetizing very, very quickly, they're adapting very, very rapidly, and it's a business. And one of the things that I think about, and obviously there's a big relevance here to payments because crypto systems have been, for the past 10 years, the most, I'd say, the most seductive way for the bad guys to monetize what they're doing, right? Whether it's, how many here have heard of ransomware? I'm having a hard time seeing, but so ransomware is relatively well known. Ransomware is a very, very fast return on investment because it's basically an infection and it's an extortion, right? You're infecting systems to extort money from the company or the entity, and it's happening in Puerto Rico, it's happening everywhere, and there's psychological warfare there because when you look at the screens, it says you have 24 hours to be able to pay in crypto for your information to get your information back. And typically speaking, you see a clock, so it's like a bomb. And then they'll tell you, if it gets to 50%, we'll delete 50% of your data. So obviously there's a lot of things to think about when you're hosed with ransomware, but I'll share a quick war story. A couple of years ago, big supermarket chain, had a challenge with ransomware, and they were infected. All their database systems were infected, so they couldn't receive goods and services, meaning their oranges, their bananas, so they couldn't really function as a supermarket. They couldn't deliver. They had to go back to pen and paper to get the goods, the bill laden, and everything else. And we were called in to help. As we're looking to support, we find that there's a ransom note from the bad guys in the system. And that ransom note, says in a bit broken English, says, okay, we'd like $400,000 and you'll get the crypto keys. The crypto keys is what you need to be able to decrypt the encrypted information that, was basically your computer systems, you can't use them, right? And so we started negotiate after we found out that we couldn't restore the systems from the backups, which is usually, that's actually the last line of defense. So anybody here in technology, make sure your backups are hygiene and they're air gapped. That's the best way to not have to go to the next step. The next step was having to have a conversation with the bad guys and negotiate ransom in crypto. What's interesting about the story is they requested about $500,000 worth of crypto, and they said they would give us the crypto keys and whatnot. We were able to negotiate down to $300,000, and big supermarket chain, family owned, and we typically write a letter that says, this is art, this is not science, there's no guarantee we're going to get the crypto keys and help you get back online, but it's worth a shot. Our batting average, by the way, has been 100% so far. But the reality of what happened in that case was that we started the negotiation on a Thursday. We got to a $300,000 ransom payment in crypto. We made the payment. Typically speaking, within a couple hours, you'll get the crypto keys to be able to decrypt. And Friday comes in, no response. It was nobody at the other end of the phone was answering. We're sending notes. Our director of incident response Saturday morning, we're obviously panicking because everybody's calling us saying, "Hey, where are the crypto keys? We paid $300,000." Obviously, even though that it's art, it's not science. We had a very upset and anxious customer. And on Saturday morning, our director of incident response says, "Okay, you know what? We are going to have to do a Hail Mary here and send a total post office in the dark web and say, so-and-so gang asked us for payment for this, and they didn't give us the goods and services," right? The goods and services of the payment, because we already completed the payment, the goods and services. So we send a total post office to all the message boards, all the dark web. We didn't get a response back. But Monday morning at 8 a.m., 8:05 a.m., we get an email through their preferred method of communication, which is a specialized email system, and we get all the crypto keys and a note in broken English, and it says, "Thank you for transacting with us. Here are all the crypto keys. This is the process of what you have to do. By the way, we'd like to let you know that we are honest thieves." They didn't say that, but they said, we provide a service. We're here. We would like you to go back on that message board and say that we provided the service back to you because we live by our reputation. So again, honor amongst thieves. And so it demonstrates, and that's just one of many examples, right? It demonstrates that there is a lot of value, and I mean value, no pun intended, in the dark side, because at the end of the day, these guys are in commerce. And it's a multi-layered system. When you're dealing with the guys that are giving you the crypto keys, they're not the guys who programmed the ransomware or the virus or the infection vector. It's a pyramid type organization, and they all work together and they all get a cut of what you're paying. So again, payments, the good and the bad, but make sure your backups are clean. It's a good story.
I think it's a good way to wrap it up, right? And that's not necessarily the example we all want to hear, right? Because it's about the bad guys, but I think ultimately payments are about trust, right? And that's why we're here, and that's what we're trying to build. It's about trust within the ecosystem and all the parties in the ecosystem. So if we don't get consumers to trust us, if we don't get banks to trust us, if we don't get merchants to trust us, a payment doesn't go through, right? And ultimately, We can talk as much cybersecurity and fraud prevention as we want. It comes down to education and trust, right? So yes, we need to invest in the right technologies, but ultimately we need to make sure that we deliver a product and that we deliver a service which our customers and our consumers can trust.
Yeah, like they say, for everything else, there's Mastercard.
Absolutely.
So maybe any questions? There's a question in the audience. It's a hard time to see here, but. We did actually. We did repost. We did reposted a note that the full cycle had been completed. No comments on the behaviors or whatnot, but we did post back a note on the message boards. And it's a good point because these guys live by reputation, and they have their own ranking system. You use avatars in the dark web to be able to transact. So it's all about reputation, and that's kind of how they do business. And business is a booming. Question in the back, I think.
Okay. Going back to the beginning of your presentation, what are the 2 or 3 main hurdles that you see locally for Puerto Rico to be up to date versus other jurisdictions or Latin American countries in terms of contactless payments and digital payments?
So 2 or 3 what?
Hurdles that we have to overcome in order to get up to date.
Yeah, so we were talking about contactless. I think that's definitely one, right? That's a big opportunity, is something we need to tackle. That's mostly an opportunity, right? We want to think more about that than a hurdle. I think the other is how do we get, and that's a major one, right? But access to credit. Access to credit is still a hurdle and a challenge for a lot of people. In Puerto Rico, we tend to think that in a number of countries, financial inclusion is a problem. That's not the case in Puerto Rico. 75% of the population have access to at least one financial product. However, if we look specifically at credit, that number goes down quickly, right? So to less than 30%, right? At least thinking on credit cards. So how do we work towards expanding that base? How do we provide further access to credit? How do we underwrite differently? How do we leverage data and technology to provide or to identify alternative credit sources? And that's clearly something that's not solved for overnight, but I think that's an important hurdle, because credit is a key enabler for economic development and for financial literacy, right? So debit is a transactional product, but credit is what actually allows you, right, to acquire assets and to expand possibilities. So that's something we're obviously, through our partners, we don't do credit, but that's something we're focused on when we think on financial literacy. So I thought contactless, access to credit is important, and then supporting, and this is specific to Puerto Rico again, given the demographics and the distribution when we think age-wise, the distribution of the population, there's a challenge to make sure everyone feels comfortable going online, right? We tend to think, and a lot of people feel very comfortable buying online. That's not the case for everyone. So how do we make sure that we have the right products out there and the right level of education and the right guardrails so we can provide access to the benefits of a digital economy that works for everyone?
As it relates to cybersecurity and kind of the model of credit cards, which were invented, prior to the internet, it's kind of like giving the combination to the safe and saying, please only take out what you're supposed to. Do you see that the payment industry is going to change significantly to prevent the large chargeback problem we see with merchants, maybe to like a crypto model where it's push only instead of pull? Do you see this fundamentally changing, or are we going to be stuck with credit card numbers for a long time?
I think, and I can give my perspective, and interested in hearing yours as well, Hector, right? But you said credit card numbers, right? I think tokenization is the key when thinking about credit card numbers. And digital identities, again, how do we make sure, right, that most of the transactions are authentic? And that should reduce chargebacks, right? And how do we move in that direction where the digital environment is poised for disruption in that space, right? And again, digital authentication and tokenization would be the key to move in that direction. There's clearly lots of, and you clearly know about the payments ecosystem and the value chain, there's lots of things that need to happen, right? But I would say that I do expect that to change. And we do have seen some changes, right? But there's work to be done, and I would focus on those two key aspects to make things better.
Yeah, I would echo that. That I think the crypto rails still have some. There's work to do there when you think about. So in banking, you have something called KYC, which is Know Your Customer. In crypto, there's something called KYT, which is Know Your Transaction. There's a lot of startups that have come up maybe in the past 5-7 years that are there to kind of look at the transaction for crypto and where it goes, because once you make the payment, it's kind of hard for it to come back. There's a very interesting case study in Brazil, something similar. It's called Pix. Pix is like the ATH mobile of here. It's non-branded. It's managed by the Central Bank of Brazil, and it's a phenomenon because it's really beating any other payment system in the country. And today you go to the beach in Brazil and you use your phone through a QR code to get like a beer or chips or whatever. I was walking down Sao Paulo a couple months ago, and there was a homeless person on the street, and he was asking for cash, and I said, I don't have any cash, and he goes, I take Pix. And so it really demonstrates kind of the evolution of payments in a country like Brazil, which is a very, very big country. But they have a very big challenge, and you mentioned chargebacks. They have a big challenge because once you make the payment on Pix, you can't get it back. So the Central Bank of Brazil has had to provide actually very antique rules and regulations that the credit card business has had for many years. For example, you go to an ATM in some countries, you can't take cash out from 9 p.m. to 9 in the morning. So they've had to do that with Pix, where you can't use Pix, or there's a limit to how much Pix you can use at night, because there's a lot of fraud and there's a lot of different types of criminal behavior, criminal underground, because Pix is so pervasive in the country. And I think that's a challenge for crypto. That's a challenge for account to account. In a way, the brands or the payment rails, with Mastercard, Visa, American Express, Discover, JCB, all these brands have dedicated a lot of years to a trustworthy ecosystem, and that's part of the cost, right? If you're a merchant and you're going to accept credit card payments, there usually is a delta in price because you are paying for that trustworthy ecosystem. Pix is like cash. So I think that's one of the challenges today. I think you'll still see chargebacks because there's different levels of maturity and adoption. When you look at an issuer today, most bank issuers that issue credit cards have very high levels of tokenization, but maybe a merchant or an acquirer on the other side does not have that level of adoption. So there's friction in the transaction, and that friction usually causes the chargeback or causes other methods for the transaction not to happen. So again, to that point, I think there's still work to be done. All these emerging payment flows are great, but there's still a lot to do to make sure that it's a fully trustworthy ecosystem. I don't know if that answered your question, but I think it's a longer response.
It's the never-ending question, right, on how to balance or security with friction and customer friction, right, in the payment experience. And usually, when you see smaller payment systems, or systems tend to prioritize the experience, and as those systems begin to scale, which is what we see with crypto, other problems begin to emerge related often to security in that payment system, right? So it's balancing growth with friction and with convenience. I guess that's it.
All right. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thanks for staying and bearing with us.